The world was young when he first opened his eyes to the night. The stars were closer then, brighter, as if they still remembered their maker's touch. He had no name, no breath, no heartbeat, only hunger. The wind carried the scent of life from the valleys below, warm, pulsing, and fragile. He moved without sound, his bare feet barely touching the ancient soil. The moonlight painted his pale skin silver. When he reached the first settlement, he didn't understand what he saw: humans living together, laughing, breathing. The sound of their hearts was music and torture at once. His thirst rose like fire through his veins. He fed that night, clumsy and desperate, and when the first blood touched his tongue, he felt something awaken inside him, a power both terrible and divine. Centuries passed, and the nameless creature became a myth whispered in fear. Villages vanished overnight, and only trails of ash and silence were left behind. They called him Varos, the breathless one. His eyes burned red as dying suns, and his voice could bend wills. But even power grew hollow. Varos began to feel the weight of his curse. He never aged, never slept, never forgot. The faces of those he devoured haunted him, their eyes wide with terror, flickering like dying candles in his endless memory. "Why must I feed to exist?" he would ask the wind, but no answer came. The world changed, yet his loneliness stayed, older than the mountains that began to crumble beneath time. One night, under a crimson moon, Varos wandered into a dying forest. The trees were blackened by fire, their branches reaching like bones. There he met a woman unlike any he had seen in thousands of years. She did not run when she saw him. Her eyes were calm, silver like water. "You are the one they call the Deathless," she said. Her voice trembled, but her gaze did not. He nodded, unsure why he didn't kill her. "I am cursed," he replied. "No," she said softly, "you are chosen." Her words pierced him deeper than any blade ever could. For the first time, something other than hunger stirred inside him: curiosity, and the faintest echo of hope. She called herself Lyra, the last keeper of an ancient order sworn to guard the secrets of the first night. She told him of the prophecy that one born of blood and silence would decide the fate of all life, whether to end it or renew it. Varos laughed, the sound dry as dust. "I am no savior," he said. But Lyra only smiled. "Every monster was human once," she whispered. Her kindness unsettled him. In her presence, he felt pain he had long forgotten, the ache of what it meant to feel alive. When she reached out and touched his hand, his skin burned, not from hate, but from memory. The sun hung low, its light trembling across the ashes of the forest. Varos stood unmoving, watching the colors fade. He had not seen a sunrise in 10 millennia, yet it no longer burned him. The air shimmered around him like a veil, thin and trembling. Lyra stepped beside him, her cloak brushing the ground. "You were not meant to exist," she said softly, "and yet, here you are between life and death." Her words lingered in the air like a prophecy. Varos turned to her, his crimson eyes reflecting the faint gold of dawn. "If I was not meant to exist," he whispered, "then why do I endure?" Lyra looked at him, sadness in her smile. "Because even death forgets what it fears." Her voice shook slightly, but her conviction did not. As they walked through the forest remains, Lyra spoke of the old world, a time before men, before gods, when creatures of shadow and light shared the same breath. "You are one of the firstborn," she explained. "Born when the gods' hunger for perfection turned to madness. They created you from their own fear of dying." Her words pierced him like ice. Varos stopped walking. "Then I am their sin," he said. Lyra nodded. "Yes, and their punishment." The wind howled between the broken trees as if echoing her words. Varos clenched his fists. His hands still trembled from the warmth of sunlight. "If they made me eternal," he said bitterly, "then I will find them and end eternity." Lyra did not argue. She simply looked at him, pity in her gaze. As night returned, the old hunger awoke again. Varos felt it crawl beneath his skin, the ancient thirst that time could not erase. His body shook with restraint. Lyra watched him, her hand on the hilt of her blade. "You must feed," she said, not in fear but in knowing. He shook his head violently. "No more," he growled. "I will not take from the living." But the beast inside him laughed, a voice without sound. His vision blurred. He could hear the heartbeats of animals, of insects, even the pulse of the earth itself. The need was unbearable. Then Lyra stepped closer and placed her wrist before him. "Then take it from me," she said. His eyes widened. "You would die." "Perhaps," she whispered, "but maybe it is time someone shared your curse." Varos hesitated, torn between horror and hunger. The scent of her blood was unlike anything he had ever known, pure, ancient, alive. His fangs ached, his soul screamed. When he finally sank his teeth into her skin, it was not savage, it was sorrowful. Her blood burned like fire in moonlight. He felt her memories flood into him, the laughter of her childhood, the fall of her people, the loneliness of her vow. Tears welled in his eyes as he drank, not of desire, but of grief. When he pulled away, she was pale, trembling, but alive. He stared at his hands, shaking. "Why?" he asked. Lyra smiled weakly. "Because even the undead need to remember what mercy tastes like." The stars burned brighter that night. Varos looked at the sky, his body trembling with newfound power and guilt. He could feel her blood within him whispering, awakening something buried deep inside. His veins glowed faintly with silver light. "What have you done?" he asked. Lyra's eyes shimmered. "I have given you a choice," she said, "to become more than what they made you." Far beyond the forest, something stirred, ancient eyes opening in the darkness, sensing his change. The gods had felt the shift in the blood. The undead was no longer bound by their law. And as Varos lifted his gaze to the heavens for the first time, the night itself seemed to whisper his name. For 3 nights, Varos did not rest. The forest stretched endlessly before him, alive with whispers and unseen movement. The taste of Lyra's blood still lingered on his tongue, strange, sacred, and powerful. It had changed him. He could feel it in every breath of wind, in every heartbeat that echoed through the night. He was no longer just undead, something new had awoken inside him. But power came with consequence. The shadows around him had begun to move differently, not fleeing from him, but watching. He knew then that the gods had noticed. Their eyes, invisible yet heavy, followed his every step. "They know," Lyra said as they walked beneath the stars. "You have broken their balance." Varos did not answer. His jaw tightened, and for the first time in ages, his heart, once still and silent, began to beat. They reached the ruins of an ancient temple, half buried in the earth. Columns carved with forgotten runes stood like broken teeth against the night sky. Lyra ran her fingers across the stones. "This is where the first blood was spilled," she whispered. "Your beginning." Varos stared at the altar, a slab of obsidian stained with marks older than the moon. He could see it even now, visions of the past, gods draped in light and shadow, binding him with words of fire. Their voices filled his mind, cold, commanding. "Feed on the living. Fear the light. Never die." He stumbled backward, gripping his head as the memories tore through him. Lyra caught him before he fell. "You were not born of evil," she said. "You were born of their fear." When he opened his eyes again, the world had changed. The stars above the temple flickered red, and a low hum filled the air. A voice echoed through the ruins, not human, not divine, but something between. "Child of the first night," it said, "why do you rise?" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Varos stepped forward, defiance burning in his eyes. "To end what you began." The wind howled, and a form appeared before him, tall, luminous, and faceless. The god's presence made the ground tremble. "You cannot end eternity," it said. "You are its chain." Lyra drew her blade, though she knew it would be useless. "Then I will break," Varos hissed, "before I kneel." The god's laughter echoed like thunder. "We made you immortal so you could remember our power. And you will." In a flash of light, the god struck. The force threw Varos into the temple wall, cracking stone like glass. His blood splattered the altar, hissing as it touched the runes. Lyra screamed his name and rushed forward, slashing at the light with her blade. The weapon shattered, but the distraction gave Varos enough time to rise. His wounds closed instantly, not with darkness, but with silver light. The god paused, surprised. Varos stepped forward, his eyes glowing. "Your power is fading," he said. The god's voice faltered. "What have you done?" Varos raised his hand, and the air around him pulsed. "You made me from your fear," he said slowly. "But fear can die." The light in his veins flared, and for the first time, the god retreated. Its form flickered, breaking apart into wind and ash. When silence returned, Varos fell to his knees. The following nights were heavy with silence. Every tree, every shadow seemed to breathe with warning as Varos and Lyra traveled deeper into the forgotten lands. The stars no longer shone as brightly, clouds of ash moved across the sky like slow tides. Lyra noticed that Varos had begun to change. His eyes, once burning red, now flickered silver in the dark. When he walked, the earth did not recoil. The wild things that had once fled from his scent now lingered at the edge of his path, curious rather than afraid. She whispered once, half to herself, "The curse is bending." Varos turned his gaze toward the horizon where mountains slept. "Or breaking," he said. The weight in his voice made her shiver. She wondered whether breaking the curse would also break him. They came upon a valley veiled in mist. At its center stood a pool of still water, so dark it reflected nothing. Lyra felt her chest tighten. The air there pulsed like a heartbeat. "This is holy ground," she murmured. "Or cursed ground," Varos replied. He knelt beside the pool and touched its surface. Instantly the water glowed crimson. Symbols rose from the depths, spirals, circles, and lines like veins. They formed words neither of them could read, yet both understood. Blood remembers its maker. Varos felt the light crawl up his arm and into his chest. Pain spread through him, searing yet familiar. He saw flashes of the first god's hand, dripping with silver fire, shaping him out of darkness. He heard voices screaming, "The blood will one day turn against its father." The pool stilled. Varos looked at Lyra. "It is me," he said quietly. "I am the prophecy." Lyra stepped closer, her hand trembling as she reached for him. "Then the gods feared you even before you were born." Varos nodded slowly. "That is why they cursed me to thirst so I would never be strong enough to rise." He clenched his fist. The light inside him pulsed again, this time steadier. "But your blood changed that." Lyra shook her head. "I gave you nothing you didn't already carry. I only woke up when I was asleep." Her voice softened. "Every drop of blood carries memory. Maybe yours carries the memory of rebellion." Varos turned toward the pool again. "Then I will give it a reason." His reflection rippled, and for a heartbeat, he saw another face, older, crowned in gold flame, eyes hollow with pride. He knew it was one of the gods watching through time. "They are afraid," he said. "Good." Night fell thicker than before, pressing against their skin like smoke. As they camped near the edge of the valley, Lyra traced the runes she had copied from the pool onto the ground. "These are warnings," she said. "The prophecy isn't only about you. It speaks of a blood storm, a war between the living and the undying." Varos's eyes narrowed. "And the gods will burn in it." Lyra hesitated. "If you start that war, many will die, human and divine alike." Varos turned his gaze toward the mountains where distant lightning flashed. "They made death eternal. Let them taste it." His tone was calm, but beneath it, Lyra sensed the storm growing. He was not the same creature she had met. The mercy she had given him still lived, but it was buried under centuries of rage finally finding a purpose. Before dawn, Varos stood alone. The sun rose like a wound over the mountains, bleeding gold into the sky. Varos walked alone through the mist, his cloak dragging over stone and ash. The wind carried whispers faint, broken voices that once worshipped gods now long forgotten. He felt them inside him like echoes of the dead calling his name. Each step grew heavier as the light thickened around him. He could feel it, the power of the next god, ancient and radiant, waiting. The air burned with the scent of fire and rain. "I have come for you," Varos murmured, his voice low. The silence that followed was vast, endless. Then the ground trembled and the horizon split with light. From the blaze stepped a figure of pure flame, its eyes like twin suns. "Child of night," it said, "you walk where no shadow should." The god's light was unbearable, but Varos did not turn away. "I am no shadow," he said quietly. "I am what your light left behind." The god's laughter rolled like thunder, shaking the mountains. "You defy the dawn? You were born from decay." Varos' silver veins glowed brighter, his fangs flashing in the light. "And yet I stand," he said, "while your brothers hide." The god's smile faded. "Then burn." Flames erupted from its hands, scorching the ground. Varos raised his arms, and the fire struck him, but instead of consuming him, it curled around him like mist. The light inside him shimmered, feeding on the flames. "Your fire cannot destroy me," Varos said, stepping forward. "It remembers me. You made me from it." The god roared, its brightness dimming as Varos drew closer. Far away, Lyra felt the earth shake. She rose from her rest, heart pounding. "Varos," she whispered, knowing he had found another god. The sky over the mountains turned crimson. She gathered her things and began to run. The wind screamed through the valley, carrying with it the scent of burning air. When she reached the ridge, she saw a dark figure standing in the heart of a storm of light. The god towered above him, wings of fire spread wide. Yet Varos did not yield. Each blow of flame struck him, each wound healing faster than it could be made. His voice rose above the thunder. "You called yourselves creators," he shouted, "but you were only afraid to end." The god's voice broke through the blaze. "Endings are mercy. You were born without it." Varos's eyes flashed silver white. "Then I will make my own." With a single step, he vanished into the light and the mountain exploded with sound. Lyra shielded her face as the flames turned white, then faded into silence. When the smoke cleared, the god was gone. Only ashes and molten stone remained. In the center stood Varos, kneeling, his body cracked with lines of silver fire. His breath came slow and heavy, though he needed none. Lyra approached carefully. "You killed him," she whispered. Varos looked up, eyes distant. "No," he said. "I released him. They are trapped by every god, bound by their own creation. I freed him from eternity." His voice was softer now, almost sorrowful. "That is what I am meant to do." Lyra touched his shoulder gently. "Then what happens when you free them all?" He looked at her, and in his gaze was something human. "Then I will free." The wind died. Even the trees stopped breathing. As Varos and Lyra entered the northern plains, sound itself seemed to fade. There were no birds, no whispers, no echo of their steps, only stillness so deep it pressed against their bones. "This place is wrong," Lyra murmured. Varos said nothing. His eyes scanned the horizon, where black stones jutted from the earth like broken teeth. The air was thick and heavy as if time had slowed. Every step they took felt swallowed by something unseen. "We are near," Varos said. His voice seemed to vanish before reaching her ears. He placed a hand over his heart. The faint silver light inside him flickered. "This god does not rule over flame or light," he whispered. "It rules over silence." Lyra's throat tightened. "Can such a thing be killed?" Varos gave a hollow smile. "We are about to find out." They came to a great chasm that split the land in two. A bridge of stone stretched across it, narrow and cracked. Beyond it, the air shimmered faintly, a shadow that was not a shadow. "This is where sound ends," Lyra said. Varos stepped forward. The moment his foot touched the bridge, every thought in his head stilled. The voices of memory, the pulse of blood, even the faint hum of the wind are all gone. Only one thing remained, a whisper not from outside but within. "You should not have come." The voice was neither male nor female, neither cruel nor kind. It was the voice of absence itself. Varos's chest ached. "Show yourself," he said, but the words came out as a thought, not sound. The world pulsed once, and the air in front of him rippled. The god appeared not as light nor flame, but as emptiness given form. A hollow shape, shifting, made of smoke and darkness. No face, no eyes, yet Varos felt its gaze. "You are noisy in a perfect world," it said. "You are hungry, movement, and breathing. All that defies peace." Varos gritted his teeth. "Peace?" he thought. "You call this peace? You drown life in nothingness." The god's shadow quivered, its form widening to cover the bridge. "There is no life without silence. The living speak to hide their fear. You are their fear made flesh." Varos raised his hand, and silver light burst through his skin. The silence cracked like glass. "Then fear will answer you," he thought, and lunged forward. The bridge trembled under their clash. No flame, no thunder, only waves of pressure that shattered stone and bent light. Each strike of Varos's hands tore through emptiness that instantly healed. He could not hear himself scream. He felt the god press into his mind, stripping away thought after thought. "You have lived too long," it whispered. "Give me your silence and you will rest." For a heartbeat he faltered. "Rest." The word wrapped around him like a lullaby. He saw flashes of 10,000 years of endless hunger, loneliness, death. 1,000 suns rising and falling over his curse. "Rest," the god said again. He felt himself slipping, the light inside him dimming. Then he saw Lyra standing at the far end of the bridge, her eyes wide, her lips forming his name though he could not hear it. And in that silence, her face gave him strength. Varos roared not with sound, but with memory. Every life he had taken, every voice silenced by his thirst, screamed within him. The silver light flared, breaking through the god's shadow. "You cannot fight silence with noise," the god warned. Varos stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "Then I will fight it with life." He drove his hand into the hollow chest of the god. The emptiness howled not sound. The world seemed quieter after the battle, but the silence that followed was not peace, it was waiting. Varos and Lyra walked through the valley where the god of silence had died, though nothing truly dies in a place like that. The ground pulsed faintly as if remembering what it had witnessed. Varos's steps were unsteady, his cloak torn, his eyes dimmer than before. "You lost something back there," Lyra said softly. He nodded without looking at her. "A piece of me," he murmured. "Each god I destroy leaves an echo behind. I absorb their strength, but their essence claws at me." His voice trembled slightly, which frightened her more than any monster could. "How much can you take before you're not yourself anymore?" she asked. Varos stopped walking. "I don't know," he said. "But if I stop, the world will remain in chains." He turned to her with a small, tired smile. "And I can't bear that." As the night deepened, they camped beside a ruined temple. The wind moved through the cracks in the stone, whispering like lost spirits. Lyra built a small fire, though Varos sat apart, staring into the dark. His reflection danced in the flames, a pale figure with eyes that glowed faintly silver. "You should rest," she said, though she knew he didn't sleep. "You forget," he replied quietly. "Rest belongs to the living." The words should have been cold, but they weren't. There was sorrow in them, a longing too deep to hide. Lyra approached him slowly, kneeling beside him. "You still feel," she said. "That's proof you haven't lost everything." Varos looked at her, the firelight glinting off the faint cracks in his skin where silver light pulsed like veins of metal. "Feeling is my curse," he whispered. The gods gave me hunger and you gave me pain. Both remind me that I exist. Later that night, Varos felt a faint hum beneath the earth, like a heartbeat too vast to belong to any creature. He rose, every sense sharp. "Something's waking," he said. Lyra stood too, clutching her cloak. "Another god?" He shook his head. "No, something older." The ground split open nearby, and from it came a wave of cold that extinguished the fire. Lyra stumbled back as black mist poured out, twisting into shapes, faces, limbs, voices. The whispers clawed at her ears, though she couldn't understand the words. Varos stepped forward, his eyes glowing brighter. "These are not gods," he said grimly. "They are memories, the fragments of what I've destroyed." The mist reached for him, pressing against his chest. "They're trying to return to you," Lyra said, fear in her voice. He didn't move. "They already have." The shadows surged, merging into his body. His back arched, light spilling from the cracks in his skin. Lyra screamed his name, but he didn't answer. The silver in his veins turned dark, then red, then black. For a moment he looked human again and then monstrous. His voice when it came was layered, distorted. "They do not want to die," he said, though it was not his voice alone. The words echoed with countless tones, the gods he had slain, the souls he had freed, all speaking through him. Lyra took a step back, trembling. "Varos, fight them." His gaze flickered, one eye glowing silver, the other shadowed and hollow. "I'm trying," he said, then roared as the darkness burst outward, forming wings of smoke and light that shook the temple walls. The earth cracked beneath him, and the stars above dimmed, as if afraid to witness what he was becoming. When the storm of power finally eased, Varos collapsed to his knees. The wings faded, leaving trails of light in the air. Lyra ran to him, kneeling beside his trembling form. "You're still here?" she whispered. He looked at her with hollow eyes. "Am I?" His voice was raw, fragile. "Every time I kill one of them, I take what they were into myself. Their power fills me, but so does their will. I can feel them inside, waiting to take control." Lyra cupped his face in her hands. "Then I'll remind you who you are. As long as I'm here, you're Varos, not them." He looked at her for a long moment, then closed his eyes. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "Someday I may not recognize you. And when that day comes, run." Lyra's grip tightened, tears falling freely. "Then you'd better not forget me." Dawn crept over the shattered temple, pale and silent. Varos sat on the edge of a broken pillar, staring at his hands. The veins beneath his skin shimmered faintly silver mixed with black, light and shadow tangled like opposing rivers. Lyra watched him from a distance, afraid to speak. He hadn't moved since the night before. "You should feed," she said finally. His voice came softly, almost a whisper. "It no longer helps. The hunger changes. It's not blood I crave anymore. It's a memory." The words chilled her. "Memory?" He nodded, his eyes reflecting the dawn's weak light. "The gods I've taken, they live in me. Fragments of who they were, what they feared. I feel their memories bleeding into mine." He clenched his fist. "Sometimes I can't tell which thoughts are mine." Lyra walked closer, her voice trembling. "Then hold on to what's real to me, this world, the purpose you chose." Varos looked at her, and for a moment his gaze softened. "You sound like someone who still believes in salvation." "Maybe I do," she said, "because you've given me reason to." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and stone. Varos stood, his cloak snapping behind him. "We must go east," he said. "To the ruins of Altharis." Lyra frowned. "The city of the first fire? It's cursed." He nodded slowly. "That's why it's calling me." They traveled for 2 days across black plains littered with bones, remnants of wars long forgotten. Each night, Lyra saw flashes in her dreams. Fire falling from the sky, a god screaming, and Varos standing amid the flames, untouched. When she woke, he would already be awake, staring toward the horizon. On the third day they reached the edge of the ruins. Towers of obsidian jutted from the ground, melted together by some ancient heat. "This is where I was made," Varos said quietly. Lyra looked at him in shock. "Made? You mean born?" He shook his head. "No. Forged." They entered the ruins. The air shimmered faintly, thick with old magic. The walls were covered in carvings not of men but of gods. Lyra traced one with her hand, a tall figure with burning eyes holding a sphere of light. "Who are they?" she asked. Varos stopped beside her. "The architects, the first gods. They shaped life, death, and everything between. I was their mistake." He touched the carving and light flared beneath his fingers. The ground trembled. "They built me to devour their enemies," he said, "but when the war ended they feared me. So they sealed me beneath the world." Lyra stared at him, horrified. "Then your curse is their punishment," he finished. "To hunger forever. To never die nor rest." His voice shook just slightly. "They thought eternity would break me. It almost did." As they ventured deeper, a faint hum grew stronger, like a heartbeat pulsing through the stone. "Something sleeps here," Lyra whispered. Varos nodded. "No sleep," he said. "Waits." They entered a vast chamber filled with pillars of glass, each holding faint shadows inside. Faces pressed against the surface, twisted in silent screams. Lyra gasped. "Souls," she said. "Thousands of them." Varos's expression darkened. "The architects fed them to me. Every god, every mortal who defied them." His voice trembled, not from fear but sorrow. "I was their weapon. I was at their end." He placed a hand on one of the pillars. The shadow inside reached toward him. "And now," he whispered, "they reach back." The glass cracked, light spilling through it like water. Lyra stepped back. "Varos, don't," but it was too late. The pillar shattered. The souls poured into him screaming, blinding light, endless memories flooding his mind. He staggered, falling to his knees, hands clawing at his head. "Varos!" Lyra cried, grabbing his shoulders. His eyes snapped open, glowing white. "They remember," he shouted, his voice echoing like thunder. "They remember what the gods did." The ground shook, walls splitting as energy surged outward. Visions flashed through his mind: the creation of the world, the betrayal of the gods, the moment of his birth. He saw himself, chained and burning, surrounded by divine light. "I wasn't born a monster," he whispered. "They made me one." Lyra held him as the chamber began to collapse. "Then we'll make them pay," she said fiercely. Varos looked at her, his face streaked with tears of silver. "No," he said softly. "We'll make them remember." The ruins of Altharis burned with ghostly light long after the collapse. Varos and Lyra stood among the wreckage, their faces pale beneath the silver glow that spilled from the shattered pillars. The ground trembled faintly, as though the world itself had begun to remember. "You saw them," Lyra whispered. "The gods who made you." Varos nodded, his eyes still shining faintly white. "I saw everything," he said quietly. "The war they tried to erase, the truth they buried in time." His voice deepened, laced with sorrow. "The architects built the world from sacrifice. Every sunrise, every life, born from something they destroyed. They called it balance, but it was greed." Lyra swallowed hard. "And you?" He turned to her slowly. "I was meant to consume the broken parts of creation to keep their world clean." His hands trembled. "But when I began to question why the world needed to be cleansed at all, they called me a demon." They began to walk through the ruins, stepping over fallen stone and broken statues. The faces of gods lay scattered in pieces, cold, perfect, and hollow. "If you remember everything," Lyra said softly, "then you also remember how to stop them." Varos gave a bitter smile. "There is no stopping them, only revealing what they are." His gaze drifted toward the horizon. "They sleep now, bound by the cycle they created. But every time I kill one, I tear a hole in their dream. When the last is gone, they will awaken and the world will burn again." Lyra stopped walking. "Then why keep fighting?" she asked. "Why not let them sleep?" Varos looked at her, eyes filled with something more painful than anger. "Because sleeping gods still control the living." As they reached the center of the ruins, they found what remained of an altar, a circle of black stone etched with silver lines. At its heart stood a single crystalline shard, faintly pulsing with light. Varos approached it slowly, his fingers trembling as they hovered above it. "This is their heart," he murmured. "The core of Altharis. The first spark that gave the gods their power." Lyra frowned. "Can it be destroyed?" He shook his head. "No. But it can be remembered." He touched the crystal and light exploded outward. Images filled the air, visions of gods standing in fire, their voices like thunder. Lyra covered her ears as the echoes screamed through her mind. "He will devour the sun," one voice cried. "Then chain him beneath the world," shouted another. Varos fell to his knees, clutching his head. "They feared me before I even existed," he gasped. "They called me sin before I had done anything at all." The light dimmed, leaving only the crystal's soft glow. Lyra knelt beside him, her hand trembling as she touched his arm. "Then their sin was creating you," she said quietly. "They built a weapon and blamed it for being sharp." Varos looked up at her, something fierce and fragile flickering in his eyes. "You speak as though I can be forgiven." "Not forgiven," she said. "Understood." For a long moment he was silent. Then he rose, his shadow stretching long across the ruined ground. "Understanding won't stop what's coming." His voice was heavy, carrying a weight older than time. "They'll awaken soon, and the world will see them as gods once more. But I will remind creation what they truly are." He turned to her, the light of the crystal reflecting in his silver eyes. "I will end their eternity even if it costs me my soul." That night, they camped on the outskirts of the ruins. The stars above seemed dimmer, as if veiled by an unseen hand. Lyra couldn't sleep. The echo of the gods' voices still haunted her. She turned toward Varos, who sat watching the horizon, his face half in shadow. "What happens when you're done?" she asked softly. "When they're all gone?" He didn't answer at first. Then, without turning, he said, "Then I disappear too. I was born of their creation. When they die, so do I." Lyra's heart clenched. "There has to be another way." Varos smiled faintly. "There never is. But for the first time, I don't fear the end." He looked up at the stars. "After 10,000 years, maybe it's time I finally rest." Lyra's voice broke. "And what am I supposed to do when you're gone?" Varos turned to her, his gaze soft. "Live," he said simply. "That's all I ever wanted." The world began to tremble days before the awakening. Mountains shuddered, seas turned dark, and the moon cracked faintly in the sky like a pale wound. Lyra could feel a vibration deep in the ground, steady and unrelenting, as if something beneath the earth had begun to breathe. Varos stood on a ridge overlooking the black plains, his cloak fluttering in the rising wind. "It's time," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. "The first of them stirs the one who forged my chains." Lyra's heart quickened. "The god who imprisoned you?" He nodded. "The god of chains. Once it called itself Malakar, the architect of control. It bound the stars, the oceans, even the laws of life itself. And when it grew afraid of what it made, it bound me too." He turned to her slowly. "What we're about to face isn't power. It's the idea of power." They descended into a valley carved by time itself, where molten rivers glowed beneath a sky heavy with smoke. In the center stood a vast monolith, its surface carved with runes older than memory. The air around it shimmered, and Lyra felt pressure in her chest, as though invisible hands pressed against her heart. "It's already awake," Varos said quietly. The runes pulsed once, then cracked open like a shell. From within emerged a figure draped in metal chains that moved like serpents. Its eyes were forges of burning steel. "Varos," it said, its voice echoing through every stone in the valley. "My proud creation returns." The sound made Lyra's knees tremble, but Varos stood still. "You remember me?" he said. The god's chains slithered across the ground, hissing. "How could I forget the weapon that turned on its master?" Varos's silver veins burned bright beneath his skin. "You made me kill your enemies," he said, "but you never told me they were your own kin." Malachar smiled, a sound like grinding metal. "Truth is a chain, Varos. The world needs order, and order needs silence." The god raised one massive hand, and the air thickened. Lyra felt her body freeze, her limbs heavy as stone. "He's binding me," she gasped. Varos stepped forward, unflinching. "Let her go." The god tilted its head. "Do you command me, child of blood and ash?" Chains lashed outward, striking Varos's chest. He staggered, then steadied himself, eyes burning. "I command nothing," he said. "But I am done kneeling." The ground shattered beneath his feet as he leapt forward, his fist wreathed in silver fire. The blow struck Malachar's chest. The sound was like worlds colliding. The shockwave tore through the valley, breaking stone and sky. Malachar staggered but did not fall. Its chains writhed like living things, wrapping around Varos's arms and throat. "You forget what you are," the god hissed. "My creation cannot defy me." Varos gritted his teeth as the chains burned into his flesh. "Then unmake me," he growled. The god pulled tighter, and the sound of cracking bone echoed through the air. Lyra screamed, struggling to move. "Varos." Her voice broke through the storm, and something inside him snapped, not in pain, but in defiance. The silver light in his veins surged, bursting through the chains. The god reeled back as molten fragments of metal rained to the ground. Varos's eyes flared white. "You think chains make order," he roared, "but they only make prisons." He lunged forward again, driving his hand through the god's chest. Light and fire exploded outward. When the brilliance faded, Malachar's form crumbled into dust. The chains fell lifeless to the ground, ringing softly in the silence that followed. Varos stood still, his body trembling. The light inside him flickered erratically. Lyra rushed to him, helping him stay upright. "It's over," she said breathlessly. He shook his head. "No, it's only begun." His voice was hoarse, broken. When a god dies, its power doesn't vanish. It spreads and the others feel it. He looked toward the darkening sky, where faint ripples of light danced like veins through the clouds. "They're waking faster now." Lyra's face was pale. "Can you handle them all?" Varos didn't answer right away. Then he looked at her, eyes haunted. "No. But I have to try." That night, as they made camp among the fallen chains, Lyra watched him from the firelight's edge. He seemed smaller somehow, not weaker but heavier, as though carrying the weight of the dead god within him. "You freed yourself today," she said softly. Varos stared into the flames. "Freedom is another word for loneliness." His voice was low, distant. "Every time I kill one of them, I feel them inside me, their thoughts, their fears, their will." Malachar's chains are gone, but his voice isn't. Lyra moved closer, placing her hand over his. "Then don't listen to him. Listen to me." He looked at her, eyes glimmering faintly. "And what do you say, mortal?" She smiled weakly. "That even a weapon deserves peace." For the first time in centuries, Varos laughed, a quiet, human sound that faded into the wind. The road to the city of Ash was silent except for the sound of distant thunder. The land stretched out in gray plains, littered with the bones of giants. The air was thick with dust and memory, the wind carrying whispers that were not quite words. Lyra walked a few steps behind Varos, watching the way he moved. He seemed slower now, his steps heavier, as though something invisible dragged behind him. The chains of Malachar, though shattered, had left their mark. Sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, the faint outline of those chains shimmered across his skin, glowing faintly red. "We're almost there," Varos said, his voice low. Ahead, the horizon flickered with a dull orange glow, the last remnant of a city that had burned for 1,000 years. "Why come here?" Lyra asked. "Because this is where gods fall," he said quietly, "and where I began to question what I was." When they entered the city, the world seemed to hold its breath. Towers of ash leaned like ghosts, their shadows long and broken. Every street was covered in a fine layer of gray dust that clung to their skin. The air was hot, though no fire burned. Lyra touched a wall and felt it crumble under her fingers. "It's like everything's waiting to disappear," she whispered. Varos nodded. "This place was once sacred. Mortals built it to worship the gods. When I rebelled, they burned it themselves to erase what they couldn't control." His voice grew distant, heavy with grief. "The first to die here were my followers." Lyra looked at him sharply. "Followers?" He nodded slowly. "Those who believed I was not a monster. Those who thought I could free them. They were wrong." His eyes dimmed. "I couldn't even save one." They reached the city's heart, a vast courtyard where a blackened fountain stood, cracked and dry. The ashes around it swirled as they approached, forming faint shapes, faces, arms, fragments of voices. "They're still here," Lyra said softly. "Their souls." Varos closed his eyes. "They're bound to me," he said. "Every death I caused, every life I failed to save lingers. When Malakar's chains broke, they followed me back." Lyra stepped closer. "They don't hate you," she said. "They remember you." But Varos shook his head. "Memory is worse than hate." His voice trembled now. "It means they never moved on." The air around him thickened, and the ashes began to rise. Faces formed in the smoke, human and god alike, all whispering his name. Varos fell to his knees, clutching his head. "They won't stop," he gasped. "They won't let me forget." Lyra ran to him, her hands gripping his shoulders. "Fight them, Varos," she cried. "They're not real." But they were. She could feel it. The whispers filled her mind, pressing images behind her eyes. Fire, blood, endless night. "You promised to save us," one voice said. "You left us to die," another whispered. Varos roared, his silver light flaring so bright it turned the ashes to glass. "I did what I had to," he shouted. "I never wanted this." The courtyard shook, buildings collapsing around them. Lyra clung to him, tears streaming down her face. "You're not the monster they say you are," she said fiercely. "You're more than what they made you." Varos's light began to dim again, his breathing ragged. "If that's true," he whispered, "then why do I still feel their pain?" She pressed her forehead against his. "Because you care. And that's what they never understood." When the light faded, the city was still again. The whispers had vanished, leaving only the faint crackle of settling ash. Varos stood slowly, his face pale and distant. "They're gone," he said softly. Lyra wiped her tears. "You set them free." He nodded, though his expression was heavy. "No, they set me free." He turned to the horizon, where the faint glow of dawn began to rise. "But something has changed. The gods, they're not waiting anymore. They're moving." Lyra's eyes widened. "How many?" Varos looked up, his gaze dark and cold. "All of them." For a long moment, they stood in silence as the first wind of morning swept through the city of ash. Then Varos spoke again, his voice quiet but steady. "It's time to end this." Lyra took his hand. "Then I'll stand with you." He looked at her and for the first time smiled without sorrow. "Then I won't face the end alone." The dawn that followed was unlike any before it. The sun rose red and trembling, its light distorted by the air itself. The ground pulsed faintly beneath their feet, like the heartbeat of something immense and ancient. Lyra and Varos stood on the ridge overlooking the ruins, watching the sky fracture into streaks of gold and crimson. "They're waking," Varos said softly. His voice carried both awe and dread. The architects, all of them. Lyra felt the wind push against her, warm and heavy. "Can you feel them?" she asked. He nodded, eyes unfocused. "Their minds are a storm. They're angry, confused, but not afraid." He paused, expression tightening. "They never expected a mortal to stand beside me." Lyra looked at him. "Then we'll make them remember why they should be." A faint smile touched his lips, fleeting and fragile. "You remind me of the first fire," he said. "Small but brave enough to burn the dark." They traveled for days through lands that no longer obeyed nature. Forests turned to glass, rivers flowed upward into the clouds, and the air itself shimmered with divine energy. The gods' awakening had unbalanced the world, twisting reality into fragments of their dreams. "They're reshaping creation," Varos explained. "Each one trying to claim dominion again." Lyra frowned. "What happens if they succeed?" "Then existence itself will tear apart," he said quietly. "Too many wills, too many truths." They stopped by a broken cliff overlooking a black sea. In the distance, golden towers rose from the water, glimmering faintly, a new city being formed in moments by divine hands. "That's where they'll gather," Varos murmured. "The Hall of the Makers." Lyra stared in wonder. "It's beautiful." "And deadly," he replied. "They're weaving the world anew, one where mortals are nothing but shadows." His eyes darkened. "I won't let them." That night, they made camp beneath a dying tree. The wind was restless, carrying the faint hum of voices that weren't human. Lyra sat beside the fire, staring at the stars, or what was left of them. Many had gone out, replaced by strange, shifting lights. "I used to wish on stars," she said softly, "when I was a child." Varos looked up at the empty sky. "And did they ever answer?" She smiled faintly. "No. But I liked to think someone was listening." He studied her for a long moment. "Maybe that's what makes mortals stronger than gods," he said. "You believe even when the silence is endless." He glanced at the flames, his expression distant. "When I was first made, I thought purpose was everything. But now, I think love is stronger." Lyra looked at him, eyes glimmering. "Then you've already won," she whispered. He didn't reply, but his hand brushed hers in the dark. By morning, the sky had turned white, too bright, too pure. A tremor ran through the earth, followed by a sound like the cracking of glass. Varos froze. "They've opened the gate," he said. In the distance, the golden towers pulsed with radiant light. Columns of fire and shadow spiraled into the heavens. "The architects are assembling," he continued, his tone grim. Lyra drew her cloak tighter. "What will they do first?" Varos's gaze hardened. "They'll call judgment on me and anyone who stands with me." He looked at her meaningfully. "You still have a choice, Lyra." She stepped closer, her eyes fierce. "I made my choice the day I followed you into the dark." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and tender. Then Varos nodded. "Then we fight together." The wind rose suddenly, carrying the faint echo of 1,000 voices chanting his name, not in reverence, but in warning. As they descended toward the sea, the sky split open above them. From the wound in the heavens poured light and shadow, gods in their true forms, vast beyond comprehension. They descended upon the golden towers like stars falling to earth, their radiance turning the waves to mist. Varos stopped at the shore, the reflection of their glory dancing across his face. "There they are," he said quietly. "The beings who shaped creation, who feared what they made." Lyra took his hand. "And now they'll see what they created." Varos closed his eyes, his silver veins blazing brighter than ever before. "No more chains," he whispered. "No more masters." He looked up at the gods and spoke words that shook the sea itself. "I am the shadow you buried. I am the sin you denied. And I have come home." The first strike came like thunder. A beam of crimson fire tore through the clouds, slamming into the Black Sea. Waves rose hundreds of feet high, glowing with molten light. From the heart of that inferno, A figure emerged, tall, cloaked in flame, his eyes burning with hatred and sorrow. "Varos," he called, his voice shaking the heavens. "Brother of ash, traitor of gods." Lyra flinched at the sheer power in his tone. Varos's expression darkened. "Kareth," he said softly. "The first fire. My brother." The god of flame stepped onto the shore, and every grain of sand turned to glass beneath his feet. "You were meant to guard the balance," Kareth said. "Instead, you brought ruin." Varos took a step forward, the air shimmering around him. "I brought the truth," he replied. "And truth burns worse than fire." The brothers stared at each other across the fractured shore, two immortals bound by the same birth, now destined to destroy one another. Lyra could feel the world tremble between them. "You can't fight him," she said, her voice breaking. Varos looked at her sadly. "If I don't, everything burns." He raised his hand and silver light ignited around him, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Kareth's flames flared higher, forming wings of molten gold. "Then let the world decide who deserves it," he thundered. The clash that followed was beyond mortal sight. Fire and shadow collided in waves that shattered the ocean, sending storms spiraling across the horizon. Lyra fell to her knees, covering her face as light consumed everything. She could hear their voices of anger, grief, and love woven into the chaos. "You were my brother," Kareth roared. "You were my heart." Varos's voice answered, raw with pain. "Then you know why I can't stop." Their powers met again and the sky split in two. When the light faded, both figures were gone. Only smoke and silence remained. Lyra rose unsteadily, her ears ringing. "Varos," she shouted. No answer. She stumbled across the blackened shore until she saw a figure lying amid the ruin. It was Varos, his armor cracked, his light dimmed. She knelt beside him, tears streaking her ash-covered face. "You're alive?" she whispered. He coughed weakly, a faint smile on his lips. "Barely." She looked around. "Where's Kareth?" Varos's expression fell. Gone. Consumed by his own flame. He closed his eyes for a moment, grief washing over his face. "He wasn't evil," he murmured. "He just believed too deeply." Lyra held his hand tightly. "And what do you believe?" she asked softly. He opened his eyes, silver light flickering faintly. "That belief without mercy becomes a weapon." The world was quiet again, but only for a heartbeat. The sea began to churn once more, darker this time, not from fire, but from shadow. A shape rose from the depths, massive and formless, its voice like the whisper of a storm. "One has fallen," it said. 9 remain. Varos struggled to his feet, his expression grim. "The next comes soon," he said. Lyra helped him stand, her hands trembling. "How many gods are there?" 10, he answered. "And every one of them carries part of what I am." She stared at him. "Part of you?" Varos nodded slowly. "When they made me, they took something from each of themselves. Their strength, their fear, their pride. I was meant to be their reflection. Their weapon." He looked toward the dark sea. "Now they'll come to reclaim what they lost." That night, as they took shelter among the ruins of a shattered temple, Lyra couldn't sleep. The fire between them burned low, casting long shadows on the cracked walls. Varos sat beside her, silent, staring into the flames. "You mourn him," she said softly. "Your brother." He nodded. "He was the last to speak to me before they cast me down. He tried to stop them." Lyra hesitated. "Then why fight him?" Varos's gaze was distant. "Because love doesn't always mean forgiveness. Sometimes it means doing what they couldn't." He turned to her, his expression weary but resolute. "Every god I face brings me closer to the end and to what I once was." She reached for his hand. "Then let me remind you who you are now." He looked at her, something fragile in his eyes. "And who is that?" she smiled faintly. "Someone worth saving." The air grew colder as they entered the Valley of Echoes. Mist coiled between the stones, and the sky hung pale and lifeless above them. Lyra shivered beneath her cloak. "It feels like the world is holding its breath," she whispered. Varos said nothing. His eyes were distant, his steps slower than usual. "She's near," he murmured. "The Dream Keeper." Lyra frowned. "The goddess of dreams?" He nodded. "She gave me my heart when I was made. Not out of kindness, but so I could understand pain." His voice darkened. "She called it a gift. I called it a curse." The mist thickened as they walked, turning the world into shifting shapes. Then a soft, melodic voice drifted through the air. "Varos," it sang. "My lost creation. Do you still dream?" Lyra froze. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, wrapping around them like silk. A figure emerged from the mist, tall, radiant, draped in veils of silver and blue. Her eyes glowed faintly, like moons reflected on water. "You've changed," she said gently. "I remember when your eyes were full of wonder." Varos's expression hardened. "And I remember when yours were full of lies." The goddess smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I lied to protect you." "You lied to control me," he replied. "You filled my dreams with love so I wouldn't see the chains." She stepped closer, her bare feet leaving trails of light. "And yet, you still dream of me." His jaw tightened. "Only when I remember what I lost." Lyra watched them silently, realizing the bond that still tied them was older than time itself. There was love in their voices and grief sharper than any blade. "You don't have to fight me," the goddess said softly. "You were never meant to be a weapon. Come back, Varos. Sleep again. Let the pain fade." She reached out a hand, and the mist shimmered into visions of endless fields, skies of gold, laughter that felt too real to be false. Lyra gasped. "It's beautiful." Varos shook his head. "It's a lie." The goddess looked hurt. "Does truth matter if the dream is peace?" Varos's voice was low, trembling. "Peace without truth is only silence." The visions began to fade, the air trembling with sorrow. "You can't kill me," she whispered. "I live in every dream, every hope." Varos's eyes glowed faintly. "Then I won't kill you," he said. "But I will wake the world." He placed his hand over his heart, and a pulse of silver light rippled outward, tearing through the mist like a dawn breaking open. The goddess screamed not in anger but in heartbreak. The valley shook as her form began to unravel into light and memory. "You don't understand," she cried. "If mortals stop dreaming, they'll stop living." Varos's expression softened. "No," he said quietly. "They'll start living for real." He stepped closer, his hand brushing her fading form. "You taught me how to feel, Dreamkeeper. But now I choose what I feel for." Her eyes met his, shimmering with tears of light. "You were always my favorite creation," she whispered. "Then why did you break my heart?" he asked. She smiled faintly as her light began to scatter. "Because I wanted you to have one." With that, she dissolved into a rain of silver dust that drifted into the wind. The mist cleared, and the valley lay silent once more. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes wide with grief. "You freed her," she said softly. Varos shook his head. "No, I freed myself." He turned to the rising dawn, his expression both weary and resolute. "There's one left." Lyra's heart sank. "The last god." "Yes," he said. "The one who made the rest. The source of all chains." He looked at her, his gaze gentle. "When I face him, I may not return." She shook her head fiercely. "Don't say that." He smiled faintly. "Even gods end, Lyra. But love doesn't." She took his hand, her voice breaking. "Then let love end with you." He squeezed her fingers. "No, let it begin." As the first light touched the valley, the silver in his veins flared like dawn fire. The final battle was coming, and with it, the end of gods. The sky was black when they reached the end of the world. No stars shone above, No wind stirred the dust beneath their feet. It was a place beyond life and death, a vast plain of glass, where the horizon curved into infinity. Lyra walked beside Varos in silence. She could feel the heaviness in him, a weight that no mortal could carry. "This is where it began," he said quietly. "Where he made me." She looked up at him. "The Creator?" He nodded. "The one who birthed light, gods, and chains alike." His voice trembled slightly. "He doesn't destroy. He simply erases." They stopped at the center of the plain, where a single pillar of light rose into the darkness. It pulsed faintly, like the slow heartbeat of the universe itself. "He's waiting," Varos whispered. "He always is." The light deepened, shaping itself into a figure vast, featureless, yet unbearably human. It spoke without words, its voice echoing directly inside their minds. "My son." Varos stiffened. "I am not your son," he said. "All that is comes from me," the being replied calmly. "Even rebellion." Varos's silver veins glowed brighter. "You made me serve. I broke my chains. That's not rebellion, that's becoming." The Creator tilted its head. "You were my reflection, my perfection. And now you are broken." Lyra stepped forward, trembling. "He's not broken," she said. "He's alive." The voice grew colder. "Mortals should not speak in the presence of eternity." Lyra's breath caught, but Varos moved between her and the light. "You will not touch her," he said, his tone quiet but filled with power. The ground trembled. The Creator's light flared, casting long shadows across the endless plain. "You defy your maker," it said. "I defy your meaning," Varos replied. "You exist because I allowed it." "Then take it back," Varos said fiercely. His voice rose until it shook the sky. "Erase me if you can." The air cracked open, blinding with light. The Creator reached out a hand vast, infinite, and the world itself seemed to shatter under its will. But Varos didn't move. He raised his own hand, and the silver within him ignited, burning hotter than any star. The two forces met, light against light, creation against defiance. The sound was beyond the sound of a roar that existed inside the soul. Lyra fell to the ground, covering her face, tears burning her skin. When she looked up again, the world was splitting apart, the sky folding into the sea, time unraveling like silk. Varos stood at the center of it all, his form flickering between man and light. "You made me destroy your enemies," he shouted, "but I learned to love what you feared in life." The Creator's voice boomed, "Love is weakness." "No," Varos said softly, "it's freedom." He thrust his hand into the pillar of light, and for a moment the entire universe seemed to stop. The Creator screamed, not in rage but in grief, a sound older than existence. Light poured from the wound, flooding everything. Lyra's body felt weightless as she was lifted into the glow, her voice lost to the wind. Through the brilliance, she saw Varos turning toward her, his face calm, peaceful at last. "It's over," he said. "Live for me." "Don't leave," she cried, reaching out, but he was already fading. "You freed me, Lyra," he whispered. "Now dream without chains." When the light finally dimmed, the plain was gone. In its place stood a field of green, warm sunlight spilling across the horizon. Lyra woke among the flowers, the air filled with birdsong. The sky was whole again, soft blue, endless. She sat up slowly, her eyes searching for him. But Varos was gone. Only a faint shimmer in the air remained, drifting like silver dust. She touched it gently, tears falling onto her hands. "You kept your promise," she whispered. As she stood, she saw something carved into nearby stone, words that hadn't been there before. "Freedom begins where fear ends." Lyra smiled faintly through her tears. She looked to the sky, where a single new star burned brighter than all the rest. "Goodbye, Varos," she said softly. "You're finally free." And for the first time in 10,000 years, the world dreamed without gods.